YouTube? Welcome back to the Red Caboose. Today I'm going to kind of give you an overview on how I put together this kit bash, also known as the Big Forney, or in my friend circle, the Fornepod. It was originally inspired by the one that a man named Judy owned that he called the Big Forney. It is a decapod chassis stuck underneath a Forney body. And I gotta say, this was quite the build. So I'm excited to show you guys what I've done to get this thing working, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. So let's get to it. Alright, well, YouTube, hopefully by about this point I've already made an intro for this kit bash project. My friends wanted me to document this. This is I guess, a tribute to the late Judy, who passed away a year ago now, unfortunately. Around that time, that was about when I had discovered some of the stuff he did. The YouTuber Al Puglisi. Forgive me if I said that. That was very hard to say, but this is a little bit of a tribute to him. I had a couple of friends who also wanted me to do this after they saw how fun looking that engine was. So I figured, or they wanted me to do it because I'd been doing other kit bashing projects. So here I am, just kind of documenting it as best I can. I should have started documenting before I cut it up before I took both engines apart and cut them up. But so Al Judy's engine is basically a Bachmann Forney, right? The Bachmann Forney that has a decapod wheelbase under it. And it's really quite ingenious. I have absolutely no idea how he did it, so I'm just kind of making it up as I go. And I've already cut the frame in half as to where I need it to go, and this will be saved for any future projects. The wheels, the cylinders, the motor mount, anything that was from the drivetrain of the Forney is going to be saved for another project. But everything else on top is going to be sitting on top of the decapod chassis. And it's going to be quite the project, honestly. I have absolutely no idea how this is going to turn out. I have faith that I can do this, but I've never done anything like this before. This is quite the project. So nothing about this is going to be easy because I don't exactly have any power tools, so it's all going to be cut and chopped by hand. I cut this frame. That's all a handsaw. It's all by hand. It's not fun, nor is it easy, and that is probably the most stressful part about it, is cutting metal parts that I don't have tools to make it quick. Yes, I could have done a Dremel, but it would have left me with less material here, and I probably would have lost access to the little screw holes that hold this outside frame on. So I had to cut it by hand. And welcome back. It is now a week later from the previous segment, and I've made very little progress aside from what I just did this last hour or so. So I had to trim down the frame here. Let me see if I can get something to point with. I had to trim down the sides of the frame so that the main drive rods would not hit it while in motion. So, and to do that, I had to buy myself a coping saw. So that's why there wasn't any real progress. I bought myself a little jeweler's coping saw so I can do smaller cuts and whatnot. But that's what I've been doing. And as for the build, I've had to trim a little bit off the end of the main frame. And then I'll have to go in and then trim down these little detail segments so that way the boiler will sit lower. And as for the boiler weight, I actually had to I had to remove this section, forgive me, and this little pieces on the end here to be left with this section. And this is the motor and drive housing, the motor and drive housing, which will then sit on the frame like so. Oops. Need to sit it on there, right? There we go. We'll sit on there just like that. And then with these pieces all trimmed down, the boiler will sit on top. I'll grab the boiler here. Here's the boiler. Oops. Everything is free floating. And then it'll sit on top just like that. Right? And unfortunately, because of where the motor is positioned, I have to cut the back head out. Now, I don't know if this is what Judy did on his model, and me and one other friend kind of speculate that's what he had to do to not have to jerry-rig a drive. So I am going to end up cutting out this whole back head. And I've kind of started. I've got a couple of starting cuts you can kind of see right there to where it's going to go. Made them slightly bigger, so it's got a little bit of wiggle room. And then I also have to do a little bit more trimming to the plastic frame here to get that all to sit into place. And then after that, it's just assembly and getting the wires to work. I'm going to leave this in, so I think this board is DC compatible, so I should be able to just run it off of a DC controller. But yeah, this is where I'm kind of at, and I'm definitely moving along. I'm not looking forward to cutting this back head down. I'll tell you that right now. But yeah, that's kind of the progress, and then hopefully once everything is kind of sat where it needs to be, and as long as this boiler shell sits flat on this frame, I can stick these right back on top these right back on top with little to no issue. That's the hope anyway. But we shall see when we get there. All right, the next segment I'll have some more progress done, hopefully. Hopefully by then I'll have this all cut out, or the back head cut out, and it all kind of pieced together. So we'll see you in a bit. All right, it is the next day, and well, I've gotten to the point where I'm pretty sure I can start soldering wires together. The fun part is making sure that these leads, these are brand new by the way, I just soldered these on. These power leads, and then the ones that go to the bottom of this truck right here are the same, and that's going to be fun because I got to make sure I do that, otherwise the engine either won't move or I'll cook the decoder. But I think the easiest thing to do would be to, instead of doing all the soldering work, would be just to swap sides for these if it doesn't want to run. So I think that'll be the easiest thing to do. And you know what? I'm going to find a dummy plug before I do that, so that way I don't cook a decoder. But yeah, so what I didn't show yesterday was this. I had to cut out the entire back head, and that was just so the motor could sit in like this inside the motor housing over here. Let's see, you can see, yeah. So it'll sit inside, kind of like this. Oh, sorry, kind of like this, with the motor in there, and then this will go down to the top of the frame for the motor. And I've trimmed this back a little bit. This used to have a little bit on the rear end. I trimmed that back so it didn't run into the truck. I'll probably go ahead and do after I get things wired, I'll probably record me assembling it, kind of, sort of. And I'll throw in a couple pictures here and there of the stuff that I've been doing to kind of give a little bit more detail. Another thing I had to do was I had to, I forget, stuff fall out the bottom. I had to cut this down, believe it or not. The front end of that is cast. Oh, there goes another one. Yeah, I found that out. That front end is cast. I had to trim that down quite a ways. I had to take off a whole 1/4 inch just to get the boiler to sit on there to where it looked good. I had to take out a lot of stuff off of the 10-wheeler frame. There used to be a whole bunch of piping and whatnot in here. You had to take all that out to make room. I added a little spacer right there, which I kind of filed down a little bit. And then added another kind of spacer up on top of this to help keep that sitting level. I can't remember what size of styrene I used. It was one of the thicker sections that I have. I think it was like this. I think this is like the biggest, the thickest you can get. I might be wrong, but I had to file it down to where it all fit and whatnot like that. And oh, it looks like all 3 of them have fallen out. Okay, well, I'll get those back in off camera. But yeah, I'm kind of thinking of just leaving a lot of extra wiring so that way if I ever have to disassemble this thing, it'll be easy and there's just a ton of wire to do so. So yeah, I'll just have to make sure I take a couple pictures as I'm soldering it together and reassembling to kind of throw in there, and then when I get the dummy plug, we'll throw it on the tracks for a test. And I think it'll be great. All right, so I'll see you guys when I'm ready to do a test run. Figured I'd do a little rolling test, and you know, I can't believe how smooth that is. Hey, look, there's 10 wheels under there. All right, I told you guys I'd be back for the recording of it running, and I have gotten it running. So here we go. It's quite loud. So at first I had a little bit of issues with getting it running. And as I found out, the Decapod chassis, its copper contacts, both sides were making contact with the center driver, causing an arc. And so that may be why the original Decapod was for sale. Oh, wrong direction. Anywho, I got it running now. At first it didn't want to go and I couldn't figure out why, but now it's running and it's about time to just go ahead and button it up. So I think the next scene you guys should be able to see her running with her all buttoned up and whatnot. And so I guess we'll just go ahead and skip to that. So talk to you guys in a bit. Whoops. Alright guys, it has been a few weeks since my last video recording, and the reason being is, well, holidays came up and so I got really busy. So I just thought I'd kind of go over what I did in the meantime, because I actually forgot to record me assembling this after repainting the cab, the bunker, and then adding some dry transfer decals. So, as you can see, there's a couple of dry transfers on the side. And the letters went on just fine, but the numbers on each side of the cab did not. So they were supposed to be dry transfers, and my dry transfers apparently dried out. So they didn't want to stick, so I ended up trying to use microset and microsol, and crazily enough, it actually worked. Kind of blew my mind a little bit that the numbers on each side of the cab stuck. So, and as I said earlier, this is my own recreation of the Fornepod that I was actually recently told that Judy did not build, or he did build. I'm actually kind of lost on that fact right now, because somebody told me he actually bought the big Forney from somebody else. But regardless, it was a video, an engine worth a rebuild. And, oh yeah, so unfortunately the H in the lettering right here didn't survive. I don't know how. It went on and then just disappeared. But yeah, this was quite the fun build, honestly. So I'm gonna get here in a few minutes. I'm gonna get my layout set up to actually get this engine running loops around. But before we do that, let's kind of go into what I had to do to get this thing operational a little bit. So, as you saw in probably one of my clips, I wired up the motor backwards. That was fun. And so it went backwards when the headlight was on instead of forwards like it should have been. Well, my bad. Took it apart, resoldered the wires, and now it runs just fine. And another thing I had a problem with was keeping this rear section level to the rest of the engine, because I actually had this whole rear end was drooping downwards at first, and that was just not gonna fly. So I had to do a lot of not a ton, but enough. I had to add some brass and some styrene. I had to add the styrene layer by layer in order to get it to be the right height, but you can't see it whatsoever, so I wasn't gonna bother painting it. And yeah, I had to modify the boiler shell. I had to completely cut out the back head. You could kind of see it in there. You see that shiny piece in there? That's the motor. Let's see if you can see it back here. Yeah, that's the motor. I had to put the motor right through the back head. I had to completely repaint the cab and the bunker, because when I took the original lettering off of the bunker, it took the paint with it. And so I was like, you know what? Let's just repaint it. So the cab and the fuel bunker got repainted. It got a nice little classic headlight with the visor on it, which I think looks real nice. And kind of in sequence to the one Al Judy owned, I made mine number 9, whereas his was number 8. So, and I went ahead and kept the more industrial kind of look to it, the nice flat black over everything, and the steel riveted cab. I thought that would be a nice little touch to it. And so, yeah, I think I should go ahead and get my layout set up for you guys, and we'll run it around and pull some cars. So let's do that.